Gotta love technology issues.
Love, love, love technology.
Yeah. Anyway, at Parcaut here with Amy Tiemeyer helping the brave, and let's get right to our guest. Since you've been talking to him for a while, while I've been fixing my issues. So J.R. Spears, let's bring him in. Is it Spear? I assume,
Yeah, Mr. Spear.
Mr. Spear. All right.
Yeah.
So we got connected. I don't know how we got connected.
Yeah, maybe it was Angel Tusi. Then I'm thinking about it. I don't know if that happens, but either way,
I don't know.
we're here.
I'm glad you're here. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Amy, did you want to start?
Sure. So I always like to ask the first question. So
Ladies first.
you were a Navy veteran. So we always ask, why did you pick the service you picked?
Oh man, how long do you want me to go into this?
As long as it takes.
So my story starts from a very young age. I grew up in a single family home. My mom, being single family or single mom with I got 4 sisters, so there's 5 of us. And I always joke saying I came out of my mom kicking because she owned a martial arts school, taught fitness, and I grew up in that space in the martial arts space and started teaching since I was about 10 or 11. And I
Wow.
say that because I grew up in a very disciplined type childhood and atmosphere and things like that. But as a child, I was still had my rebellious stages in high school. And so high school, I got really rebellious, getting in trouble with the law, hanging out with the wrong people, and group of friends and stuff like that. And then got to the point where I lost my license and needed to pay some traffic tickets and some court bonds and things like that. That I didn't have any money. I lost my job, lost my license, and my grandma, who was a very involved individual, my grandma and grandfather were both very involved in our upbringing. And my grandma came over one day, and I asked her, I said, hey, can I skip school? And I was probably like this is like my junior year of high school, I think. So I skipped school and I said, Grandma, can you take me down the street to some pawn shops so I can sell some things and be able to pay off some of my court fines and things like that? And so she agreed. And so I loaded up her car, and then she's driving down the streets of St. Louis, and she pulls behind a shopping center. And then when she pulled out of the shopping center, I looked straight in front of me, and it was a recruiter's office. And she told me, she was like, I don't care what branch of the service you sign up for, but you're gonna go in there, and you're not gonna come out until you sign up. And so at that time, I knew I didn't want to go Army or Air Force. I always had this stigma about them that they weren't as good as being the Marines or the Navy. But in the stage of my life, you have to understand, I'm hanging out with the wrong people, I'm smoking dope, I'm getting in trouble, I'm doing all these dumb things that I was actually pretty lazy. And I was like, okay, I don't want to go Marine. My uncle was in the Marine Corps. My grandfather's retired Navy, but I knew I didn't want to go to the Marine Corps because I was like, okay, they just work too hard. And so I ended up going in and signing up for the Navy. But the funny thing is, as a veteran, you guys know about the DEP program, so the delayed entry program. And so I was in the delayed entry program for about a year because I signed up as a junior, and then I had the rest of my senior year. During that time, I was ready to go as an aviation boatman handler, so it was like a fuelman, and then went into boot camp. And when I got into boot camp, I found out about this job as an RP. When RP stands for Religious Program Specialist, which essentially is a chaplain's assistant, but they can serve, in a hospital, they can serve on a ship, they can serve, with the Marines. And I always joke saying, God had a different sense of humor. Even though I didn't want to go to the Marine Corps because they worked too hard, I even spent my entire time with the Marines and absolutely love it. I probably would have hated being on, Navy full time and on a ship or doing whatever they do in the Navy life. But that's kind of how I got in there. That's how I chose the branch of the service. It was kind of led me there. And so I had the best of both worlds. If you guys served in the Navy at all, I got to play both cards. If I didn't want to hang out with the sailors, I went and play with Marines. If I didn't want to hang out with the Marines that day, I was like, hey, I'm gonna go hang out with the corpsmen, and just had a really good time. So that's how I ended up in the branch that I did.
Yeah, I was a corpsman in the Navy. Got stationed at Camp Pendleton, so I was with the Marines the whole time. Yeah.
What unit were you with?
I'm sorry. No, I was actually at the hospital. I was at the actual hospital. I was worked a corpsman down below in the hospital, and then I ended up going to physical therapy school and coming right back to the hospital, which is unusual. Yeah.
So I was at Mateo with 2-4. So 5th Marines up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Up in Pendleton. But
yeah,
that's why I did with.
And when people, like you said, you're hanging with them. Well, I got being at the hospital at Camp Pendleton was like not being in the Navy, right?
Yeah. So, no, it's very different. No, I loved it though. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. It was a good time.
So that was
Right,
a long answer for you there, Amy.
it was a long answer. It was a good answer. I was raised the same way, where I thought it was like Marines, Navy, Army, Air Force, as far as physical fitness or whatever. But what I learned after serving in the Army is that it's more like Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force. And the PT tests in the Navy were way easier to score high than they were in the Army.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know.
If a Marine's is a department of the Navy, isn't it like Navy Marines?
You I guess I don't know if you had the same experience or if you were an FMF corpsman or not, being in the hospital, but I was an FMF RP, so I actually had to do Marine Corps PFTs and standards plus Navy, since I wore all the uniforms. I mean, I wore the chucks and had to do everything. So, and my unit, they always timed it up. It was either the same day or same week. So I would have to go do the Marine Corps PFT and then go do the Navy PFT around the same time. So the Marine Corps was always like a 3-mile run plus pull-ups and sit-ups. Pull-ups and sit-ups. And the Navy was a 1.5-mile run, push-ups and sit-ups. And so it was
the Navy fit at that time. That was not really a fitness program. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we worked in physical therapy, so we worked out all the time. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I did. In the Army, it's 2-mile run. So less than the Marine Corps, 2 miles, push-ups and sit-ups. And so when I went into the Navy Reserves, only having to run 1.5 miles was a lot easier. And how in the Army, you had to have your hands laced behind your head for your sit-up.
Yeah, the Navy is
across the chest. So so that was way easier in my mind. Or for my scores. And so what was funny is in the Navy Reserves, I don't think they had anybody who was in the unit that I was in at the time very athletic. And so I remember my first PT test, I'm running and all of a sudden, like all these guys are running with me. And I didn't realize like I was setting the pace in the way. And this one guy's like, that's the fastest I've ever run. And it wasn't for me. But in the Army, my fastest 2-mile was 12:58. And so back then I was a pretty good runner. And so it was just interesting, the differences, because I, in my mind, had always put Marine Corps, Navy, Army, Air Force, but
it's crazy how we label them. Like when I was going in, I was like, I knew I'd never want to go. My dad was in the Army, I think for like 6 or 7 years. But in my head, I was like, Army's always below the Marines and stuff like that. And so I would never go there. And then Air Force, they were too geeky. So I didn't want to go in the Air Force. But, we all serve our part and have our mission, what we do. And I respect everyone that served. It's just, that's kind of where my mindset was.
Yeah, I didn't realize that the Air Force split off in the right in the late 40s from the Army, just like
Army,
the
Air
Marine Corps.
Corps.
Yeah, but now they got Space Force, right? So
they do,
which is a branch of the Air Force.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? All right. So, how long were you in?
I just did 4 and done. So I went in 2003 and got out right after my employment in 2007.
And when you got out, for transitioning, did you go through any program for transitioning, or you were just like, they just let you go? Because there's, I guess, a TAPS program. We've been talking about it, but there hasn't. A lot of people are like, well, I didn't really be part of it. How did it work when you got out at this time?
Yeah, so there was a TAPS program, but it was very watered down. I mean, honestly, I had a very rough deployment, and so we left in September 2006, and we got back May 31st, 2007, and then I was out by July 10th. So I had like very short period of time from just getting back from the desert of Iraq to getting out right away. And my deployment, I had every intention of making a career out of the military and wanted to stay in for the full 20 years. But during the deployment, I just seen too much and been through a lot. I was involved. I survived a suicide bombing at a walk-in checkpoint on February 7, 2007, which honestly changed the whole trajectory of my life. I still have issues today. I'm raising my right arm and, been through every therapy and, you can ever imagine. I still have, like, when I talk the right side of my face, I get the echo of my own voice on the right side of my ear, and I have numbness on the right side of my face still. 24/7. And this is how many years later. And just the chaplain that I was deployed with at the time, we didn't really have a great relationship. I was like, I knew that I would be back in the sandbox 3 months later after being back if I would have just stayed in. I was up for promotion, and I got out as an E4, but I was up for E5, and was up on board and ready to go. And it was just I just didn't want to go through it, and I couldn't do another 9 to 12 months of deployment back in the same place that I was at after everything I went through. So the transition of getting out, I wasn't, they had a task program. I remember sitting in a room and they had some people coming in and talking about a little bit of benefits or some local jobs, trying to recruit you for doing different things. And in my head, it's like, okay, I went in there just to hear him talk for an hour. And then I was out trying to process, to return all my equipment, do everything I can to, I'm planning my life, get out. And it was a rough transition for me. I mean, well, it was rough to the standpoint of like, I was just anxious to get out, but I didn't really have a big plan. I was like, I'm going to get out and I'm going to go to school. I had too much pride, so I didn't really know about disability. I didn't really know about my benefits. I did go straight to the VA because I knew, all right, you can go to the VA. I was injured so bad, like I still couldn't raise my arm. So I happened February 7th. We got back from July or May 31st. I still couldn't raise my arm. Like, this is really good, but raising right here without pain was just killing me. Like I just couldn't do it. But I didn't want to go to the hospital when I got back because I didn't want to be on stop loss, and I didn't want them to have to like go sit in medical and for another year or two or whatever it may be. Because at that time, you just heard so many horror stories about people that get out and then they go to the medical office bay and then they're just stuck there until they can figure out what's going on. So I just suffered through the pain. And the week I got out, I went straight to the VA in St. Louis and started, trying to figure out. And they still to this day can't figure out what's wrong other than just a bunch of scar tissue damage. And so, but my transition of getting out, it wasn't, it was more of, all right, pack your bags, fly you back home to St. Louis. And then I'm off on my own and had to figure it all out.
And I assume you got disability from it, though, right? You're on from
It took me
benefits.
16 years to get to my 100%, but I got 100%, TP now.
Oh, that's good. All right. So once you got out, right after you're dealing with this, what did you do? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So when I first got out, I knew that I did not want to work for someone. I was in the military. You're having people telling you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, show up whenever you want to. And I was like, this ain't the life for me. Growing up in a family-owned business in the entrepreneurial world, I knew I wanted to start my own business. And so I was already enrolled in Bible school at the time and was going to college to learn how to be a music ministry and things like that. And learned really fast that that's not the life that I wanted to have full-time, being full-time ministry. And so I finished one semester of that and then transitioned to business degree. So I switched colleges, ended up pursuing a degree in business, and got my bachelor's in there. And while I was in Bible school, I wanted to start my own business, but I didn't know what I wanted to start it. So I was like, okay, what are my roots? What are the things that I know that I don't have to think about and just start today? And that was teaching martial arts. I started martial arts when I was, since the day I could walk, and I've been teaching since I was about 10 or 11 years old. I trained a lot of people, even in the Marine Corps. I trained a lot of Marines and sailors in fitness and martial arts, and especially in the MIPMAP program. And, even when every duty station that I was at, I worked at a school part-time, teaching different styles of martial arts. So it was very easy for me to be able to just jump in. So I started asking questions, finding resources, found a space to have my classes at, and into building a really thriving business in a very short period of time. It all started by having a coach too. So my mom taught me or showed me about this program through Century Martial Arts called Maya, and they had a consulting program for martial arts school owners. And I ended up signing up with them, taking out some debt, and using some of the money that I made from deployment to pay for it, and that changed my entire life. So once I had a martial arts school, some different things happened during that period of time. I ended up selling it after a couple of years and started a full-time fitness business. And it was called Power Fit Boot Camp. And I ended up expanding my boot camp business to 4 different cities. So I was all over St. Louis, all over Illinois, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And, did that less than 3 years and ran my boot camp for almost a decade before we moved to the East Coast. And we live outside of Quantico Marine Corps base in Northern Virginia right now. But, I've built 6 different businesses, since I've been out. I have equity partnerships in 4 other businesses that I'm involved with in right now, and now I consult and coach other entrepreneurs on building their business with full done for you service and connections through my mastermind networking community, and which is the Business Leaders Network. That's the logo behind me. And it's been quite the journey. I've done everything from corporate sales, government sales, B2B and B2C and membership sales. I mean, anything you can imagine, I've done to really help develop and shape me who I am today.
Have you wrote a book yet?
I do. It's called I usually have a copyright here in front of me, but I don't have it with me because I sold my last copy I have here. So, but it's called The Success Guide to Building Your Coaching Empire. And so,
Where did you get it done? Did you self-publish?
No, I actually have a publisher. It's through Perfect Publishing, and his name's Ken Roshan. Dr. Smiley is what he goes by, but Ken Roshan is my publisher. And he doesn't take any royalties, but he's a phenomenal individual, friend of mine, and we do some pretty big things together. But writing that book was definitely a big piece of my. I can't say it's a big piece of my success, but it's definitely helped me with opportunities. And inside of the book, I walk through foundations of business, and especially building an online business, but also I go through 4 non-negotiable tasks that every entrepreneur needs to go through to do daily to make sure they're building a business. And as entrepreneurs and veterans, your guys' selves, you would understand, you would appreciate that it's an acronym that I created called your daily pile. So acronyms are easy to remember. So I wanted to create something that's easy to remember, but the daily pile essentially have 4 non-negotiable tasks that we need to do. And it stands for producing daily content, improving your products and services and your customer experience, leadership, and expanding your network. So inside of my book, I break down all those 4 different components that we do that every entrepreneur needs to do daily. And I mean, when I built 6 different businesses, I was like, okay, what are the things that we need to do to making sure that we're gaining authority, gaining influence, gaining to be able to build and make a bigger impact? And it came down to those 4 essential things.
And I assume that acronym's the pile part, right?
The daily pile. Yep. So the daily pile is the 4 non-negotiable tasks.
So
produce content.
What
do you mean by that? Do you mean video, everything? What do you mean by producing content?
When it comes to producing daily content, I don't specific inside the book. I don't get specific on telling you that you got to be on Facebook, you got to be on Instagram, but you got to choose where your audience is at and understanding who is my perfect client, where are they hanging out at, and wherever they're at, you got to be consistent with what you can do. So for you guys having a regular show, the Helping the Brave, this is your content that you guys need to be consistent with and be daily with, and making sure you're being out there in front of your audience. So no matter what content or medium that you guys choose to stay in front of your audience, I teach them about producing daily content, and everything that you guys post or do or blog, whatever it is, it needs to fall under 4 different filters, which everything that you post needs to be purposeful, shareable, likable, and planned. And that last piece of being planned is super important, because most people, when they're producing content on a regular basis, they just post just a post, but they don't really have a plan behind what they're doing. But we need to make sure that everything that we're doing needs to be strategic and have a purpose behind it. And so that we don't just fall in the trap and be like, okay, I'm just going to post because I'm told to post, or I'm going to upload a blog because I'm told to do a blog. I'm going to produce a podcast show because I'm told to produce content. But you need to have a strategic plan behind everything that you do.
I agree.
Yeah.
Amy, got questions, answers?
Sure. So many questions, but so I like all that you've shared. Do you feel like serving in the military has helped you find those 4 things, or has represented what in your business?
Yeah, well, as I do a lot of public speaking myself, on pretty frequently. I travel across the country and do that, and teaching other people, and have I have 2 different podcast shows myself. And as a speaker or a coach or whatever it may be, we all have a story behind what we do. And for me, my experience of surviving a suicide bombing in Iraq is part of my story, on top of everything that we learned in the military. I mean, gosh, all of us can relate to this. From the day you get off that bus and put your feet on those yellow footprints, you are starting to condition the way that you think, the way that you talk, the way that you act, the way that you conduct everything about your lifestyle and your being. And then over time, you are conditioned to act a certain way and essentially being able to respond without thinking. So when you're in a combat situation, you're having bombs being thrown at you, your initial response is to be able to pick up your rifle, lock and load, and start firing back. And we're not conditioned to just hide, cover, and not fight. We're there to stay, be mission focused, stay in that fight, and do what we're trained to do. And we do so without thinking. And so a lot of the stuff that I learned in the military and from my martial arts background helped condition me and understanding what the discipline, the commitment, and this is what I call your creed. So my consulting business I own, it's called, Creed Consulting, which is an acronym that stands for commitment, resilience, excellence, execution, and discipline. And so the question I always ask people is like, what is the one thing you're most committed to that you can be resilient even through the most difficult times, showing up every day, giving your best, and have the mental and physical discipline to complete your mission? And so the question you're asking is like, did the military teach me about the processes and things that helped me in my business today? And the answer is absolutely. But it took me a long time to really figure out how can I really take this story and the things that I went through, the training that I went through, the process that I had to go through to really turn it into business concepts that can help develop me as a better expert entrepreneur, but also how I can serve other people. And going through the resilience and the commitment and the discipline that you learn in the military and even the processes, that's no different than what we had to learn, do as an entrepreneurs today. I mean, I always say the military is one of the greatest businesses ever created because there's a system for every system. There's an order for every order. So when we are out there in the military and like we can be stationed in Djibouti or Okinawa, Japan, or wherever it may be, but we know exactly the operation. Who do we need to talk to for what? How do we do our job? And it's because we're all conditioned to do a certain thing and a certain task a certain way. And there's a system for that. In our businesses, it's no different. In our businesses, we need to make sure that if you want to be able to scale any business, there's a formula for it. Well, the formula for scalability is one, you got to have the right systems and processes in place that allows you to delegate so it can eliminate you from the process so you can participate inside of the business. So if you don't create the systems and processes, you're never going to be able to delegate certain tasks so that way you can actually eliminate you from the process, or you're going to continue being stuck inside of your business on a regular basis. So if you think about the Marine Corps, if you think about the Navy or any branch of the service, there's a system for every single piece and element that is ran inside of the military. And it's the same thing that we need to really adapt when it comes to building a business of our own as entrepreneurs. And it's creating those systems, it's creating that order, it's creating the processes so that way you can learn how to delegate. I mean, the Marine Corps or any branch is perfect at delegation. It's like, okay, you got your sergeants told to do something. They're going to go get that corporal. That corporal's going to go get their lance corporal. Lance corporal's going to go get that PFC to be able to do the job. So that way that we're able to complete that mission. No different inside of our business. We need to create that team so we can delegate certain processes so that we can complete and fulfill the mission that we're out there to do. And everything starts with vision. So, in the military, like before we go to combat, like we have to know where we're going. We got to know the mission. You got to know the vision. You got to know what you got to accomplish first. And inside of our businesses, it starts with vision and purpose. You got to know where you're going to go, why are you doing what you're doing, and then you create the processes and the steps that's going to help you be able to complete it.
Did he answer your question there, Amy? All right. So my biggest thing is being us from the military is we're so used to SOPs that everybody that usually comes out of the military, starts a business, they create all that stuff for their business, which a lot of other people do not. And it's so important to have those things in place. But one of the things that most people don't realize is if you have a business and you're trying to scale it, it's got to make sure that you're in a business that can be scaled.
Yeah.
Right. Because the one I remember, I'm in Northern California by all the tech companies, and they're like, the mortgage industry, you can't scale that. The way that they're used to scaling things, and because they've been trying to do it for a while, and they're right to a certain point.
Yeah. I mean, I think every business has a potential for scalability. It just depends on are you going to create the right SOPs to be in place, which the SOPs is the system to be able to do it. Even a mortgage business is like, okay, how can you create that chain of command so that way you can scale a mortgage business? Now, I'm not in a mortgage business, but I guarantee you there's a way that you can do it so you can scale it to a bigger level. But if you do things the old way of how things used to be ran, and you're not creating the SOPs, you're not creating the systems, you're never going to be able to delegate, and therefore you're never going to be able to expand and grow.
And you're right to a certain point. My statement was, depending on what level you scale your business to. You follow me?
Oh yeah.
There's some, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Because there's some businesses, once you learn how to scale it, you can grow whatever. There's other businesses you can only scale it so much. Like there's teams. If you have a team, you have other stuff. But I totally agree with everything you're saying about what you're talking about. Amy's writing everything down, going, "Where's this book at? Where did I get his
Right.
book at?"
I am writing. I've got like maybe 2 to 3 things for every word, but I see what you're saying, like even in the nonprofit world, like my
Oh yeah.
region is so big, and I think creating sort of like SOPs for different areas, like it would be different in the states that I don't live in to scale taking ownership of the nonprofit I work with being different.
Just got a lot of grandkids today.
Well, I got a bunch of kids that are, and I got 4 of my own. They're all in the other room screaming right now. But people look at nonprofits as like not being profitable businesses, but it's still a business, and the model still doesn't change. And so, if you want to think about it, it's like, okay, let's just say you want to take a model like $100,000 a year model, or whatever like that, or $1 million, whatever it may be. Let's just say $100,000. What is that model to like? What process do you need in place? What type of people do you need to have in place to help you create this $100,000 model? So when you can understand what that looks like, then you can take that same branch and be like, okay, I want to take this model right here, and I'm going to move it to Illinois. I'm going to move it to the Carolinas. I'm going to move it to Texas, whatever it may be, and you could duplicate it. And so let me break that down even further. So for like my business itself, if I want to create a 7-figure business model, I have to know what is my offer and how many people can I serve with the least amount of team to be able to help me reach 7 figures. Well, I know for my Cree consulting, I'm probably going to need 1 coach. So either me or hiring someone else. It's going to need 1 coach. It's going to need an operations or project manager. So like a project manager. It's going to need a web developer, and it's going to need a graphics designer. 4 people for me to be able to generate 7 figures. Once I generate that, and that's roughly about 20 clients to the max. So 20 clients for the price that we do to generate 7 figures for that. Well, once I max that out, then all I have to do is like, okay, now I want to get to my second 7 figures. Well, to do that, I'm going to need another coach, another project manager, another graphics web developer, and another graphics designer. And I keep duplicating that process no matter where I go. But you got to get to that first step to really understanding that first. And if you don't understand your client acquisition, you don't understand like what it takes to actually fulfill what you're promising your client, whatever that business model is, and how many people on that team it takes to actually do it, it's going to be really hard to start scaling, because you got to have the SOPs, the systems, the processes, and the right team in place to be able to hit that same model. And you can do that with any amount of that you want to achieve. So if it's a 6-figure business, what is that model to generate 6 figures? How many people do you need involved? What does it take to actually complete it? Do you need a coach? Do you need how many products? How many people to do what to be able to reach that 6 figures? And once you figure that out, then you can take that and duplicate that over and over and over again. But you got to figure out what that box is first. So what is that box to reach that first amount? And then once you got that down and it's systemized and it can run without you, take it and keep duplicating it over and over again. That's how I built my bootcamp business. When I had my bootcamp business, I was in 4 cities in less than 3 years, and I had more than 50 personal trainers working for me, and it was running on its own. I mean, I taught classes I want to teach at, or I had people doing it on its own, and I was living the best life. And so it's just, you got to figure out what is that model that you want to do, so that way you can eliminate you from the process and allow it to grow on its own.
I agree. All right. I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story. It's been a great story to share. Question for you would be, where can people find your book and the name of your book?
Yeah. So the best place to get a copy of my book is on my website, jrspear.com. So JR and Spear is S in Sierra, Papa, Echo, Alpha, Romeo.com. So figured being military, you guys understand the alphabet. So JRSpear.com.
That's the first thing I got rid. Second thing I got rid of, besides telling time a certain way.
Yeah, so jrspear.com. And then the name of the book is The Success Guide to Building Your Coaching Empire. So when you go on there, you'll see a button that says, buy your book. It'll take you to the order page, and then you can purchase the copy, and then I'll personally sign it and I'll send it to you guys.
There you go, Amy. Get on there and buy your book.
Yes,
No, I
sir.
think it's important for people to understand our stories. It's just not what happens in the military. It's the rest of the life as we transition and what we, because I could probably ask you right now, is there anything you'd like to do differently in your life that you did? And I guarantee you'd probably say no.
Absolutely not, because everything that I went through has shaped me to the person I am today.
Mhm.
And I do want to address one thing, because since we are talking about transitions, is we all, I'm sure you guys have people that committed suicide or struggles and have demons when they got out, especially being a corpsman. I mean, you dealt with everything from all trauma you can imagine. But those that actually suffer from doing it, my personal belief is due to lack of purpose. When we're wearing that uniform and we're in there in that fighting machine, we aren't trained to think for ourselves. We're trained to just do, and you're conditioned by it. You're trained on what to do, how to do it, when to do it. You're on your mission, whether you believe in the mission or not. Hey, you're totally here to go do this and do this job, and you know how to do it. Second, you take out that uniform, you got to make decisions for yourself. You immediately lose identity. You immediately lose purpose, and it's really hard for a lot of people to get that back. And those that never find what their true identity is and never figure out what their purpose is, they're the ones that end up still fighting the demons over and over again. I mean, not saying those that find purpose don't struggle with demons. I still struggle with my own demons. I still struggle heavily with PTSD, but I also know where I'm going. And I also found my purpose and my identity and what I'm chasing after. And so if anyone's listening to this and they're like, man, how do I get off the ground? How do I find the next steps? And, first off, you got to have a support system and the right people that can help, lean on getting there, because we can't do it alone. I mean, I've never been able to get and have the success I have. I do it by myself. I'm part of communities and masterminds in my church and different mentors to be able to do it. But I also found what my true purpose and identity is, and outside of the military. And when you can do that, then your potential is definitely unstoppable.
I agree. Amy, anything else?
No, I agree. I think I just add, I think for certain people, they weren't raised with looking for purpose. Like I always think that my story is unique because I was raised in a family of volunteers, and that's not traditional or common and different things like that. So I was raised to always value purpose tremendously and look for how we can give back and different things like that. And I do feel like it, especially in the veteran community, but also, as Ed says, in every community, people struggle with not having a purpose and not feeling connection, and therefore not building the correct relationships and different things. And so I think you're right. You're right. And it's definitely a part of it. So thank you for coming on today. Figuring out like, how did we get connected and all that was kind of a fun conversation. And
no, I'm always, I always love sharing and be able to give where I can. So I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to be able to come on here with you.
We appreciate you coming on today. We really do. And for everybody who's watching and listening, we really appreciate you. If you're listening to us on the podcast, make sure you subscribe and share it and leave a review. And again, JR, thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy, for being here. Appreciate you.